verlangen, dass ein unmöglicher Zustand auf dem Weg von friedlichen Religionen hereinzieht und die friedlichen Religionen konsequent zu verweigern.
David from London. Germany has invaded Poland and bombed many towns and villages. The actual number of deaths
out of Prime Minister Chamberlain speaking from 10 Dowdings.
And that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
This is the BBC Home Service. In a surprise attack, Germany invaded Norway by sea, land,
We interrupt this program to bring you a bulletin from Europe. Germany has invaded Denmark. Our correspondent...
The German army invaded Belgium and Holland early this morning, by land and from the air by parachutes.
In Washington today, President Roosevelt, now clearly taking a harder line on Hitler's aggression, said, "This nation will remain a neutral nation, but I cannot ask that every American remain neutral in thought and..."
NBC reports from London that British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain has just resigned. Repeating that bulletin, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain...
With Hitler now master of most of the continent of Europe, the world's eyes are on Winston Churchill, who's been Prime Minister for 3 extraordinary days.
You ask, what is our policy? I will say it is to wage war by sea, land, and air, with all the strength that God can give us. To wage war against a monstrous tyranny, never surpassed in the dark, lamentable catalogue of human crime. That is our policy. You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word. Victory. Victory at all costs.
Oh, Harry, good.
You read Churchill's cable?
Yes.
And?
Sun's over the yardarm. Join me.
Glad to, sir.
You know I can't lend Britain 40 or 50 destroyers without the specific authorization of Congress. Much as you know we'd both like to. You lost a lot of weight in the hospital. You eating enough?
Trying, you know.
What does the doctor say?
Said they got it all. You told Churchill we're going to be the arsenal of democracy?
Eleanor and I were talking this morning. What we want, what we both want, is to get you out of that little apartment of yours. Move you in here with us.
I can't do that, sir. Old country already thinks I have too damn much influence with you. They'll tear you to pieces.
You let me worry about the country. That's what I get paid for. Anyway, I need you here. All the time. What can we do for Britain right now?
We can ship today 500,000 Enfield rifles, 130 million rounds rifle ammo, 975 millimeter guns, 80,000 machine guns.
Churchill's got his whole army backed up on the beaches at Dunkirk. He could lose it all.
I know.
Get right on it.
German army advanced through France continues its spectacular drive to the sea on the front of
the British Army, as well as major elements of the French and Belgian forces, are being forced into a small and shrinking pocket around the port of Dunkirk, their backs to the English Channel.
This is the BBC Home Service. The Admiralty today requested all owners of small craft to report for what is called a special requirement.
It is something to see, Charles. Literally hundreds of boats, from huge warships to tiny fishing boats being manned by
a week ago, I had thought I would have to announce the greatest military disaster in British history. But that calamity has not befallen the Allies. Wars are not won by evacuations, but there was a victory inside this deliverance. We got the army away. We shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight in the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall never surrender. And even if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island, or a large part of it, was subjugated and starving, and our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and liberation of the old.
Tell the War Department to make estimates of how many planes and whatever else we can spare.
Generous estimates?
Very generous estimates.
Carried out a number of attacks on Great Britain last night.
I'm standing on the rooftop near Piccadilly Circus, and I see the searchlights coming on now. There's one, there's another. Now a lot of them. And there go the ack-ack guns.
Hitler knows he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say this was their finest hour.
He's right. Churchill's right. We have to get the destroyers to him right now.
It's a start.
You know, a lot of this could be settled if Churchill and I could just sit down together for a while.
What's stopping you?
Can't be arranged right now. We don't have an ambassador over there. They don't have one over here.
How about me going over for you, Mr. President?
No. Can't spare you. I've got the State of the Union message coming up, the budget, the third inaugural. I need you for all of them. Plus the Lend-Lease fight with Congress.
Yes, but if I'd been to England and seen it with my own eyes, I might be some help.
Prime Minister to First Lord and First Shield. Should Japan enter the war on one side and the United States on ours, ample naval forces will be available to contain Japan in the Pacific. Who? Harry who? Of course I know who Harry Hopkins is. A social worker or something involved in Roosevelt's work relief program. Oh, really? Personally? Ah, well now. Then if any red carpet has survived the Blitz, by all means, roll it out for Mr. Harry Hopkins. My dear Mr. Hopkins, what a very great honor this is. I do hope you have not been kept waiting.
Not at all.
Good. Well, this is a great occasion. Come, I think we can possibly find a more comfortable place to talk than this. Tell the President. Are you warm enough, Harry?
Fine.
England in January. Tell the President, we seek no treasure. We seek no territorial gains. We seek only the right of man to be free. His right to worship his God and live his life in his own way. Secure from persecution.
Mr. Prime Minister, I don't think the President will give a damn for all that. You see, we're only interested in how you propose to beat that son of a bitch in Berlin.
You say you'll be here for 2 weeks, Harry? I will make every detail of information and opinion available to you. You will not leave England until you know everything there is to know. At 4 o'clock this morning, Hitler attacked and invaded Russia. This was no surprise to me. In fact, I gave clear and precise warning to Stalin.
citizens of the Soviet Union.
The Soviet government and its head, Comrade Stalin, have authorized me to make the following statement.
At 4 o'clock this morning, despite the fact that there was a non-aggression pact between the Soviet Union and Germany, and without a declaration of war, German troops attacked our country, attacked our frontier in many places, and bombed from their airplanes our cities of Zhytomyr, Kiev, Sevastopol, Kaunas, and others. Our cause is good. The enemy will be smashed. Victory will be ours.
This is the end.
Why, Harry? Doesn't make sense to me. What does Hitler have in mind? You think he's trying to get world opinion on his side by attacking communism?
That's what he thinks. Winston will set him straight in one big hurry.
I think Hitler has just made his first big mistake.
No one has been a more consistent foe of communism than I have for the last 25 years. I will unsay no word that I have spoken about it. But all this fades away before the spectacle which is now unfolding. This bloodthirsty gutter snipe Hitler must launch his mechanized armies of slaughter, pillage, and devastation. Can you doubt what our policy will be? We are resolved to destroy Hitler and every vestige of the Nazi regime. On this, nothing will turn us. Nothing. We shall fight him by land. We shall fight him by sea. We shall fight him in the air. Until, with God's help, we have rid the earth of his shadow and liberated the people from his yoke. It follows, therefore, that we shall give whatever help we can to Russia. It is not for me to speak of the action of the United States.
A lot of people, the usual ones, are taking the position that since Russia can't hold out, there's no point sending any stuff to them. I don't agree.
But this I will say. If Hitler imagines that his attack on Soviet Russia will cause the slightest division of aims or slackening of effort in the great democracies, he is woefully mistaken.
Comrades, brothers and sisters, men of our army and navy. In spite of the heroic resistance of the Red Army, the enemy continues to push forward. Hitler's troops have succeeded in capturing Lithuania, a considerable part of Latvia, the western part of Byelorussia, and part of the western Ukraine. A grave danger hangs over our country. In case of a forced retreat, all the rolling stock must be evacuated. The enemy must not be left a single pound of grain or a gallon of fuel. All that cannot be withdrawn must be destroyed. Conditions must be made unbearable for the enemy. They must be hounded at every step.
The Secretary of the Navy says the best information he can get is that it will take anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months for Hitler to clean up on Russia. But Ambassador Davies just cabled from Moscow. He says that the Red Army will amaze and surprise the world.
These people who've shown themselves worth backing. The advantage we should reap if the Russians could keep the field and go on until the winter closes is measureless.
Find out what they need, Harry, and how we can get it to them.
Yes, sir.
In this war of liberation, we shall not be alone. We shall have loyal allies in the people of Europe and America. Our forces are numberless. The masses of our people will rise up in their millions. All forces of the people for the demolition of the enemy. Forward to victory.
We've just gotten their first request, Mr. President. They're enormous. 3,000 bombers, 3,000 pursuit planes.
Well, Davies says the result will depend on air power.
We are making, Marshal Stalin, very heavy air attacks, both by day and by night, upon all Germans within our reach. Then we hope to force Hitler to bring back some of his air power to the West and gradually take some of the strain off of you. We've only got to go on fighting to beat the life out of these villains.
We're going to have to start coordinating with the British all across the board. What they'll get, what we should both give to Russia, strategy.
How about me going back over for you, Mr. President?
Would you, Harry? Tell Churchill everything. Especially tell him not to ask when we're coming into the war. I only met Churchill once, in 1918. As I was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, we had dinner together in London at Gray's Inn. The whole war cabinet was there. He was already famous.
Whatever impression he made on you, Mr. President, I'll bet you made just as big a one on him.
Well, he was a real stinker. Rude as could be, lorded it over us. Tell him I think we ought to get together personally as soon as possible. Set that up for me, will you, Harry?
Yes, sir.
The position of the Soviet forces at the front remains tense. The military situation of the Soviet Union as well as Great Britain would be considerably improved if there could be established a front against Hitler in the West in northern France, which could not only divert Hitler's forces from the east, but at the same time make it impossible, Prime Minister, for Hitler to invade Great Britain.
Anything sensible and effective that we can do to help will be done. I beg you, however, to realize the limitations imposed upon us by our resources and geographical...
I fully realize the difficulties involved, but I have to...
The Germans have 40 divisions in France alone. The whole coast bristles with cannon, wire, pillboxes and beach mines. To attempt a landing in force would be to encounter a bloody repulse. It would all be over without their having to move a single unit from your front.
Notwithstanding the difficulties, it should be done.
You must remember, Marshal Stalin, that we have been fighting alone for more than a year. And that though our resources are growing and will grow fast from now on, we are at the utmost strain, both at home and in the Middle East, by land and air, and also that the Battle of the Atlantic, on which our life depends, strains our naval resources to the limit.
It should be done, Prime Minister, not only for the sake of our common cause, but also Britain's own interest.
This is the most we can do at the moment. I wish it were more. My dear friend, how are you feeling?
Glad to be here in July, when a man can take his coat off indoors.
Cognac.
Please. Situation's a little different from last time. Russia's in.
What we want to know, of course, is when are you going to get in?
That's the one question the president says you can't ask me. But he did ask that I get you two together in some lonely bay as quickly as possible.
The sooner the better.
What he does want us to discuss right away is, one, your ability to withstand invasion. He's concerned your airfields are vulnerable to Hitler's parachute troops. We think he's got 60,000 of them. Second, the wisdom of trying to defend the Middle East. Egypt, Libya, Syria, India. The equipment and men you're sending there might be needed here.
As far as the invasion of Britain is concerned, we have the situation well in hand. And we have taken special measures to defend all our aerodromes. And we would be able to tell 3 weeks in advance if the Germans plan to cross the Channel. With regards to Egypt and the Nile Valley, we have an army of 500,000 men. Here. Nearly half our war production is sent here. And in spite of objections from friends, it will be our policy to go ahead and reinforce the Middle East.
We really need hard information on how the Russians are doing.
Well, that would be most valuable.
Everything. Production, shipping, supply, strategy. Depends on how long the Russians can hold out. I'm wondering whether you would find it useful for me to go to Moscow.
It's a long trip, very hazardous. You'd be totally exhausted, Harry.
It would be worth doing if Stalin knew in an unmistakable way we mean business on a long-term supply job.
Stalin might tell the truth, or at least part of it, to the personal representative of the President of the United States.
Absolutely. Go.
Tell Stalin. Tell him Britain has but one ambition today, but one desire, to crush Hitler. Tell him he can depend on us. Goodbye, Harry. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
I don't know what will happen if Britain is fighting alone when 1942 comes.
I come Marshal Stalin as a personal representative of President Roosevelt, who considers Hitler the enemy of mankind and thinks the most important thing in the world is to defeat him. He therefore wishes to give all possible aid to the Soviet Union in its fight against Germany.
Welcome to the Soviet Union. Your president has asked me to talk to you as I would talk to him. The first thing I want to say is concerning Hitler and Germany. There must be a minimum moral standard among nations. Without such a minimum moral standard, nations cannot exist. Therefore, our views coincide.
I have two practical questions the President wants me to ask you. First, can you tell me what Russia will require most that the United States could deliver immediately? And second, what would your requirements be based on a long war?
Please, sit. Immediately, we require anti-aircraft guns, machine guns, 50 caliber, to defend our cities. The rifles, 30 caliber. I would need a million or more. For a long war, we would need aviation gasoline, aluminum for aircraft. Give us anti-aircraft guns and aluminum, and we can fight for 3 or 4 years. Come. The Germans have found that moving mechanized forces across Russia is very different than moving them over the boulevards of Belgium and France. The Germans can move up another 40 divisions, but probably not before the hard weather sets in. We will hold within 100 kilometers of our present position. But tell the President that while I am absolutely confident that we can withstand the Germans, the question of supply is a serious one, and we need your help.
Hold on.
Hitler is going to lose.
Now, I am sick and tired of hearing that they are going to get this and going to get that. I don't want to hear what's on order. I want to hear what's on the water. Get those planes off with a bang, even if they have to be taken from the American Army.
Mr. Prime Minister, how are you feeling? Oh, fine. Sure. I think I got what I wanted, but you can't ever be sure. Let's go see the President.
The President, Harry. I cannot tell you how excited I am finally to have the chance to meet him face to face. I wonder if he'll like me. What sort of man is he, Harry? You must tell me all about him.
He doesn't remember.
Okay. Ready?
Standing aboard now. Welcome aboard, Mr. Prime Minister.
What a very great pleasure this is for me, Mr. President, to meet you at long last.
But we've, in 1980, in Gray's, and I'm absolutely delighted to meet you too, Winston. Together at last.
Yes.
Cigarette and holder and the long cigar at last being lit from the same match.
27 years ago today, and began their last war. We must make a good job of it this time. Twice ought to be enough.
We will talk about everything, of course. But first, I believe these gentlemen have a little job to do.
Yeah, they do the same job in Britain.
What I want to hear first, Winston, is how you think this war will be won.
This is a mechanized war, Mr. President. A mobile war. In the air, on land, at sea. Immense land armies. Less important by far than in the last war. Fighting on land, in the Middle East, North Africa, yes. Anywhere the Germans exist on even or fairly even terms, there we must attack them. But in Fortress Europe, not with land armies, not at first. We must destroy the foundation upon which the German war machine rests, the economy which feeds it, the morale which sustains it, the supplies which nourish it, and the hopes of victory which inspire it. This war will be won by blockade, by subversion, and most of all, by strategic bombing.
Yes, but no major land armies? What do you tell the Russians?
The war goes upon many fronts. And before it is over, there may be yet further fighting fronts that will be developed. But our resources, though immense, are limited. And it must become a question as to where and when those resources can best be used.
I can only reiterate the absence of a second front simply favors our common enemy. Mr. President, it is inevitable that America will finally come to grips with Hitler on some battlefield. The might of Germany is so great that even though Russia will defend herself, it will be very difficult for Britain and Russia combined to defeat the German machine. The one thing that could defeat Hitler, and perhaps without even firing a shot, would be the announcement that you are going to join in the war.
I hope you won't take it amiss, Mr. President, if I tell you that I cannot answer for the consequences. If Russia is compelled to sue for peace, and say by next spring, hope has died in Britain that America is coming into the war.
Governments such as ours can only move in keeping with the thought and will of the great majority of our people. If I were to put the issue of peace or war to the Congress, they would debate it for 3 months. What I can do is look for an incident. In the Atlantic, I can wage war and not declare it. Hitler will have the dilemma, either attack our convoys and our navy, or hold back and give us the Battle of the Atlantic.
Splendid. Harry, you know, I met him once before, in 1918, when he was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and I was in the War Cabinet. He made a most vivid impression on me even then. Extraordinary man.
Losing ground.
Prime Minister, the situation of the Soviet forces during the last 3 weeks has deteriorated considerably, with the Germans having transferred to the Eastern Front 30 to 34 fresh infantry divisions and an enormous number of tanks and aircraft. They consider danger in the West a bluff and are transferring all their forces to the East with impunity.
Remember, Marshal.
Being convinced that no second front exists in the West and that none will exist. As a result, we have lost more than half the Ukraine, and in addition, the enemy is at the gates of Leningrad.
Remember, Marshal Stalin.
There is only one way out of this situation, to establish in the present year a second front, somewhere in the Balkans or France, capable of drawing away from the Eastern Front 30 to 40 divisions, and at the same time...
Although we should shrink from no exertion, there is, in fact, no possibility of any British action in the West, except air action, which would draw the German forces from the east before the winter sets in. Action, however well meant, leading only to costly fiascos, would be no help to anyone but Hitler.
to continue, and at the same time ensuring to the Soviet Union 30,000 tons of aluminum and a monthly minimum of aid amounting to 400 aircraft and 500 tanks of medium size. Without these two forms
For our part, we are now prepared to send you, from British production, 1/2 of the monthly total for which you ask in aircraft and tanks. We hope the United States will supply the other half.
Every possible effort. $1 billion worth. $2 billion.
Thank you. As I was saying, without these two forms of help, the Soviet Union will either suffer defeat or be weakened to such an extent that it will lose for any long period a capacity to render assistance to its allies. Experience has taught me to face up to reality, no matter how unpleasant it may be, and not to shrink from telling the truth.
Remember that only 4 months ago, we in this island did not know whether you were coming in against us on the German side. Indeed, we thought it quite likely that you would. Whatever happens, and whatever you do, you of all people have no right to make reproaches to us.
I have cabled our mission in Moscow today to make a commitment to Russia of 400 additional tanks a month and 3,600 additional combat planes. Very simply and very bluntly, we are pledged to pull our own oar in the destruction of Hitlerism.
I fully sympathize with Russia in her agony. But they have no right to reproach us. We have acted with absolute honesty. We have done our very best to help them at the cost of deranging all our plans for rearmament and exposing ourselves to heavy risk.
I know,
when the spring
Winston,
invasion
I know what you're
season
both
comes.
going through. But
Marshal Stalin, we shall do our utmost to repair the grievous curtailments which your war industries have suffered through the Nazi invasion. If they keep fighting, it's worth it. If they don't, we don't have to send it.
Zhukov, are you convinced that we will be able to hold Moscow? I am asking you with pain in my heart. Answer me truthfully. Answer me as a communist.
Commander of His Majesty's Armed Forces in the Middle East. Which is impossible to explain to Parliament. How our armies have had to stand for 4.5 months without engaging the enemy in North Africa, while all the time Russia is being battered to pieces.
Order of the day. Declare a state of siege. Moscow will be defended to the last. Comrades, brothers and sisters, I stated at the beginning of the war that a serious danger was facing our country. Today, as a result of 4 months of war, I must emphasize that this danger has increased. The enemy has captured the greater part of the Ukraine, Byelorussia, Moldavia, and Estonia, has penetrated the Donbass, is looming like a black cloud over Leningrad, and is menacing our glorious capital, Moscow. Wherein lie the reasons for the temporary setbacks of the Red Army?
Mr. President, I earnestly hope that you will be able to raise the general level of your war production by an immediate short-term effort.
double it.
One of the reasons consists in the absence of a second front in Europe. It is a fact that there are no armies of Great Britain or the United States on the continent of Europe at the present. And this fact brings about a situation where the Germans, considering their rear in the West secure, have the possibility of marching their troops against our country.
If it were possible, Marshal Stalin, to make any successful diversion upon the French shore, we should order it, even at the heaviest cost. All our generals are convinced a bloody repulse is all that would be sustained. However, in order to clear things up and to plan for the future, I am ready to send 2 generals to meet you in Moscow. They will be able to tell you exactly what is possible and what we think is wise. Do you want them?
If the generals will come to Moscow with a view to concluding an agreement on the 2 fundamental questions, war aims and plans for the post-war organization of peace and of mutual military assistance against Hitler, I would naturally be very happy to meet them. If, however, the mission of the generals is confined to secondary matters, it would not be, I think, worthwhile. In such a case, it would be very difficult for me to find time for the conversations.
I don't know what Stalin wants. Bad relations? A rupture? Whom would that benefit?
Reeling from the Allied embargo on steel and oil, Japan did offer some diplomatic concessions, but the president said that nothing less than Japanese withdrawal from China and Indochina would be acceptable.
Please get this right off to the Emperor of Japan. Mark it personal. Well, this Son of Man has just sent his final message to the Son of God. That's the last card I have to play for peace in the Pacific.
Good. Having lunch with the family?
You know, my cousin Ellen Adams brought all her children down.
Hopkins?
I was going to have lunch with them, but it's Sunday. Thought we might get a little quiet desk work done while we're... What is it?
No, there must be some mistake.
I tried to keep us out of war. I wanted to finish my administration without war. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. Yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack on Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. And this morning, they attacked Midway Island. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
after all. England will live, the Commonwealth of Nations, and the Empire will live. Once again, in our long island history, we shall emerge, however mauled and mutilated, safe and victorious. We shall not be wiped out. Our history will not come to an end. Hitler's fate is sealed. Mussolini's fate is sealed. As for the Japanese, they will be ground to powder.
Today, we are all in the same boat with you and the people of the Empire, Winston. And it is a ship which will not and cannot be sunk. We are now in this war. We are all in it, all the way. Every single man, woman, and child is a partner in the most tremendous undertaking of our American history. It will not only be a long war, it will be a hard war. That is the basis on which we now lay all our plans.
Franklin, now that we are, as you say, in the same boat, would it not be wise for us to have another conference?
Delighted.
No need for the cautious approach to America now. That's the way we talked to her when we were wooing her. Now she's in the harem. We talk to her quite differently.
Prime Minister, I propose a treaty between us with a secret protocol dealing with Europe's post-war frontiers. That the Soviet Union's frontier with Poland be based on the Curzon Line, and the Soviet Union is to regain her frontiers of 1941 with Finland and Romania, and will recover the Baltic states.
We cannot agree to definite frontiers without breaking pledges we have already made to Poland and others, and we are not going to do that.
It's a pity.
The transfer of peoples to Soviet Russia against their wills is contrary to all the principles for which we are fighting this war and would dishonor our cause. No one can foresee how the balance of power will lie or where the winning armies will stand at the end of the war. It seems probable, however, that the Soviet Union will need our aid far more than we shall need theirs. Hitler's losses in Russia are the prime fact in the war at this time. He now faces the shock of a winter of slaughter and the expenditure of fuel and equipment on a larger scale.
He hasn't reached Moscow yet, and I don't think he's going to.
This message came from the Marines on Wake Island just before they were overrun. Merry Christmas. Send us more Japs. Anyone want hot coffee?
No.
Tea, please, Harry.
Germany's the prime enemy. Once she's defeated, the collapse of Italy and the defeat of Japan will follow.
Germany first. Our main objective for 1942 should be the occupation of the whole coastline of Africa. That would reopen the Mediterranean route for shipping to the Middle East.
And the Far East, and starts to tighten a ring around everything the Germans now control. We'll put 3 divisions in North Africa, more if necessary. I want American forces involved as quickly as possible.
We can do more.
Help Russia every way we can.
Bomb Germany.
And blockade them. Then, in 1943, the way may be cleared to return to the continent.
Here's to 1942. Here's to a year of toil year of struggle and peril, and a long step forward to victory.
Hear, hear.
May we all come through it safe and with honor.
Winston, trust me to the bitter end.
I would like to stress that it is now when the Soviet Union is exerting all its power to throw back Hitler's troops that the fulfillment of America's deliveries, including aircraft and tanks, is essential to our common cause.
I'm terribly disturbed that an adequate number of ships is not available to Russia. This government has made a firm pledge to Russia, and we simply cannot go back on it. Where's Harry? Nothing would be worse than to have the Russians collapse. I'd rather lose New Zealand, Australia, or anything else than to have the Russians collapse. I don't want to be in the same position as the English. The only reason we stand so well with the Russians is because we've kept our promises. You've got to find some ships at once for this Russian business.
General Wavell, Supreme Commander, Southwestern Pacific. I think you ought to realize how we view the situation in Singapore. There must, at this stage, be no thought of saving the troops or sparing the population. The battle must be fought to the bitter end, at all costs. Commanders and senior officers should die with their troops. The honor of the British Empire and the British Army is at stake. With the Russians fighting as they are, and the Americans so stubborn in the Philippines, the whole reputation of our country and our race is involved.
I realize, Winston, how the fall of Singapore has affected you and the British people.
The greatest disaster in our history.
But no matter how serious our setbacks, and I do not for a moment underrate them, we must constantly look forward to the next moves that need to be made to hit the enemy. This means we now take primary responsibility for the reinforcing of Australia and New Zealand and getting assistance to China and our Navy defends against all further advances of the Japanese.
When I reflect how I have long prayed for the entry of the United States into the war, I find it difficult to realize how gravely our British affairs have deteriorated since December 7th.
We might as well admit the difficult military side of the problems. There's no use giving a single further thought to Singapore or the Dutch Indies. They're gone. Australia must be held, and we are willing to undertake that. India must be held, and you must do that. You must hold Egypt, the Canal, Syria, Iran, and the route to the Caucasus. I know you will not mind, Winston, if I tell you that you should take a leaf from my notebook. Every month, I go to Hyde Park for 4 days, crawl into a hole and pull the hole in after me. I wish you would try it. And I wish you would lay a few bricks or paint another picture.
I am so grateful for all your thoughts about my affairs and personal kindness. I went to Chartwell last week and found spring there in all its beauty. The goose I called the navel aide de camp, and the male black swan have both fallen victims to the fox. The yellow cat, however, made me sensible of his continuing friendship, although I have not been there for 8 months. I find it very difficult to get over Singapore, but I hope we shall redeem it ere long.
Comrades, along a tremendous front from the Arctic Ocean to the Black Sea, Red Army and Red Navy men are fighting fierce battles. At Moscow, the Red Army defeated the German fascist troops, which threatened to encircle the Soviet capital. It threw the enemy back from Moscow and continues to push him westward. The initiative is now in our hands.
There is a winter, you know, in Russia, where the temperature is apt to fall very low. There is snow, there is frost, and all that. Hitler forgot about this Russian winter. He must have been very loosely educated. We all heard about it at school, but he forgot it. I have never made such a bad mistake as that.
Mr. President, I doubt if any single thing's more important than getting some sort of front this summer against Germany. The War Plans Division says we've got to go to Europe to fight, and we've got to quit wasting resources all over the world, and still worse, wasting time. If we're to keep Russia in, save the Middle East, India, Burma, we've got to begin slugging with air at West Europe, followed by a land attack as soon as possible.
Still like the idea of French North Africa. What do Marshall and the Joint Chiefs say?
Western Europe is the only place where vital air superiority can be staged, the only place where the bulk of British ground forces can be committed in cooperation with U.S. forces. And success there will afford maximum support for the Russian front.
What Harry will tell you, Winston, has my heart and mind in it. Your people and mine demand the establishment of a front to draw off pressure on the Russians. And these people are wise enough to see that the Russians are today killing more Germans than you and I put together. Go to it, Harry.
Yes, sir.
And make sure Harry gets to bed early.
I am in entire agreement in principle with all you propose. The conception underlying it accords with the classic principles of war. Concentration against the main enemy.
Marshal Stalin, I have in mind a very important military proposal to relieve your critical Western Front. I wish you would consider sending Mr. Molotov to Washington in the immediate future.
Molotov can arrive not later than May 15. It goes without saying that he will also go to London to exchange views with the British.
Mr. Cocktail will be welcome here.
You should not agree to any proposal to start a second front in Western Europe on any assumption that we do not mean business. Our disposition is to take great risks to relieve the Russian front.
At the same time, if the Japanese obtain control of the Indian Ocean, not only will the Middle East be in danger, but we shall lose the oil supplies in the Persian Gulf.
Yes, Australia, Japan, the Middle East will certainly discharge our obligations. But our whole heart will be in the cross-channel invasion in 1943. 1942, if necessary, to avert a Russian collapse. Our view is the decision to proceed with a second front in Europe is one of the most momentous ever faced. The decision, once taken, cannot be reversed. If adopted, this will constitute the major effort of the United States in the war.
And there is complete unanimity in the framework of the cross-channel invasion in 1943. Full preparations can now go ahead.
I feel better about the war than any time in the last 2 years.
Let me now set out my own view of what had so far been decided, what I thought should be done. I was ready to give the cross-channel assault a fair run, with other suggestions, Northwest Africa, Northern Norway, before the planning committees. I was almost certain that the more it was looked at, the less it would be liked. But I had to work by influence and diplomacy in order to secure harmonious action with our cherished ally, without whose aid nothing but ruin faced the world. I did not, therefore, open any of these alternatives at our meeting.
I've been charged by my government to come to London to discuss the establishment of a second front. This is no new problem. The coming weeks and months on the Russian front are filled with the most serious consequences to both of us. We must know how you view the prospects of drawing off at least 40 German divisions from the USSR in 1942.
The problem of landing in France this year is being studied. Preparations are being made. Please be seated.
Thank you.
2 points should, however, be borne in mind. First, with the best will and endeavor, it is unlikely that any move we could make in 1942, even if we were successful, would draw off large numbers of enemy land forces from the Eastern Front. In the air, the position is different. If our plan for forcing air battles over the continent proves successful, the Germans might be faced with the choice either of seeing the whole of their fighter air force in the West destroyed, or making withdrawals from their air strength in the East. The second point, relative to your proposition that our aim should be to draw off not less than 40 German divisions from Russia, we have confronting us in Libya, Norway, France, and the Low Countries, 44 divisions. But we are not satisfied. And if any plan can be made for drawing the weight off Russia in 1942, we shall not hesitate.
I have no doubt that you genuinely wish for the success of the Soviet army against the Germans this summer. What, in your view, are the prospects of our success? Whatever your views might be, I would be glad for a frank expression for opinion, good or bad.
We feel great confidence in the strength and ability of the Soviet army. Now, you want to talk about the treaty of alliance between our countries.
These are the minimum conditions my government insists on. Recovering the territory violated by Hitler, the Baltics, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. We must secure our frontiers. Poland is the most delicate question, but the Soviet government will do its best to come to terms with Poland.
We propose to substitute for a territorial agreement a general treaty of alliance for 20 years, omitting all references to frontiers. The difficulties are mainly that we cannot go back on our previous undertakings to Poland and have to take account of our own and American opinion.
The big question is, can we work with Russia, now and after the war? Is it Stalin's aim to overrun and communize the continent?
Most grateful to you for meeting our difficulties in this treaty as you have done. I am sure the reward in the United States will be solid. We have done a great deal breaking down the barriers between our countries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Churchill is a strong man, very strong. Unfortunately, he'll never make a good communist.
Rommel has launched the Africa Corps to the attack. His object is to capture Tobruk. This may be the biggest battle we have ever fought. Our losses so far are 10,000 men, 350 tanks, 345 guns. Enemy killed and wounded probably equal and possibly greater than ours. This is a business not only of armor, but of willpower. Everybody must fight. They must fight. Exactly as they would if Kent or Sussex were involved.
Mr. President, I am here, as you know, to talk about the second front. This year, Hitler is the master of all Europe. To be sure, the Russians might hold and fight on all through 1942, but it is only right to look at the darker side of the picture. Hitler might throw in such reinforcements in manpower and material that the Red Army might not be able to hold out. So, Mr. President, I put this question to you frankly. Can you undertake such offensive action as will draw off 40 German divisions? If the answer is yes, the war will be decided in 1942. If no, we will fight on alone, doing our best, and no man will expect more from us than that. My government wants to know what position you take on the question of a second front and whether you are prepared to establish one. I request a straight answer.
You may inform Marshal Stalin that we expect the formation of a second front
Mr. President, we must never let the plan for invading North Africa pass from our minds.
Tell Marshal Stalin, we'll put it in the communique. Full understanding has been reached with regard to the creation of a second front in Europe in 1942.
Good. Good.
Tell Molotov to come back through London. See Churchill again.
We are making preparations for a landing on the continent in August or September of 1942. It is impossible to say in advance whether the situation will be as such as to make the operation feasible when the time comes. We can therefore make no promise in the matter. But if it appears sound and sensible, we shall not hesitate to put our plan into effect.
Never before has our association been so close, or our mutual pledge for the future so complete.
Wanting a second front and having a second front are two different things.
The important thing is we may be, and probably are, faced with real problems on the Russian front, and must make our plans to face it.
Arrangements are being made, bless you, Harry, for a landing on the coast of northern France in September.
We're disturbed here by what appears to be a lack of clear understanding between us in the event the Russians get pushed around.
We do not favor an operation certain to lead to disaster. It would not help the Russians, whatever their plight. It would gravely delay the main operation in 1943. No responsible British military authority has so far been able to make a plan for crossing the Channel in 1942 which has any chance of success, unless the Germans become utterly demoralized, of which there is no likelihood. Tobruk has surrendered, with 25,000 men taken prisoner. Defeat is one thing. Disgrace is another.
What can we do to help?
I am ashamed. I cannot understand why Tobruk gave in. 25,000 of our men put up their hands. If they won't fight, I don't...
Send 300 Sherman tanks and 100 105mm self-propelled guns to the Middle East right away.
The military misfortunes of the last fortnight have transformed the situation throughout the Mediterranean. We have lost upwards of 50,000 men. Rommel has advanced nearly 400 miles through the desert and is now approaching the fertile delta of the Nile. The evil effects of these events cannot yet be measured. If there are any would-be profiteers of disaster who feel able to paint the picture in darker colors, they are certainly at liberty to do so.
American ground forces must be put into position to fight against German ground forces in 1942. I do not believe we can wait until 1943 to strike against Germany. Invading France is of such grave importance that every reason calls for it. And we cannot do northern France. We must take second best, French North Africa or the Middle East. We're going to have to go see Winston for me again, Harry.
Lieutenant,
Here.
orders in, sir.
Yeah, let me sign them. Yeah, bring me back to division immediately.
Mr. President, sorry it took us so long to get through. The British will not willingly go ahead with France this year.
Down. If France is definitely and finally out of the picture, I want you to determine another place for U.S. troops to fight in 1942.
North Africa is by far the best chance for effective relief to the Russian front. Take into consideration the effect of losing the Middle East. Here is the true second front of 1942.
Losing the Middle East would mean the loss of Egypt and the Suez Canal,
Loss of Syria,
the Persian Gulf, access to Persian Gulf oil.
Germany and Japan joining up, and the probable loss of the Indian Ocean.
North Africa, 1942. Full steam ahead.
As you say, full steam ahead. Franklin, about shipping for Russia, we've been considering very carefully the number of convoys we're able to send.
It seems to me that any word reaching Stalin that our supplies were stopping would have a most unfortunate effect. I fear not only the political repercussions in Russia, but even more the fact that our supplies will not reach them promptly.
I beg you not to press us on this. Of the current convoy, only 4 ships have reached our kingdom, of the 33 that were sent. Out of 600 tanks, little more than 100 have arrived. This cannot help anybody except the enemy.
I must reluctantly agree.
Marshal Stalin, my naval advisors tell me that the German forces can now guarantee the complete destruction of any convoy to northern Russia. It is therefore with the greatest regret that we have reached the conclusion that to attempt to run convoy number 18 would only involve dead loss to the common cause. At the same time, I give you my assurance that if we can devise arrangements to...
The British government refuses to continue the sending of war supplies to the Soviet Union.
I must explain the dangers and difficulties of these convoy operations.
In wartime, no important operation can be effected without risks or losses. In any case, I never expected that the British government would stop dispatch of war materials just at the very moment when it viewed the situation on the Soviet-German front. We require these materials more than ever.
Believe me, my comrade and friend. No, strike that. Believe me, if 1 or 2 of our very few most powerful battleships were to be lost, the whole command of the Atlantic would be lost. Besides affecting the food supplies by which we live, our war effort would be crippled.
Our naval experts consider your reasons wholly unconvincing. They are of the opinion that with goodwill and readiness to fulfill your obligations, those convoys could be regularly undertaken.
Above all, the great convoys of American troops across the ocean, presently 80,000 in a month, would be prevented, and the building up of a really strong second front in 1943 rendered impossible.
1943? The Second Front in 1943? In spite of the agreed communique concerning the urgent task of creating a second front in 1942, the British government postpones until 1943? I must state in the most emphatic manner that the Soviet government cannot acquiesce in the postponement of a second front in Europe until 1943.
I do not propose to embark upon an argument.
Winston, your reply to Stalin must be handled with great care. You've got always to bear in mind the personality of our ally and the very difficult and dangerous situation which confronts him. Try to put ourselves in his place.
I am willing, Marshal Stalin, if you invite me, to come to meet you. I could tell you plans we have made with President Roosevelt for offensive action in 1942. Believe me, there is nothing that is useful and sensible that we and the Americans will not do to help you in your proud struggle. We hope to resume the convoys to September.
The enemy is moving into the area of Kotluban. They will overrun the last line of defense. Organize a rear guard with instructions to fight to the death to give the army units time to pull back.
I will come to Moscow. I will, if you desire. Fix a convenient
Zhukov,
date.
the enemy stands 2 miles from the city. Stalingrad may fall today or tomorrow. See to it that the commanders of the North and Northwest forces strike the enemy at once. To delay now is a crime. Any date would suit me.
Mrs. Hargreaves, send a telegram to the President. I should greatly like your aid in my talks with Joe. I have somewhat of a raw job, like carrying a large lump of ice to the North Pole. What is it my duty to say to them? The sullen, sinister Bolshevik state I once tried so hard to strangle at its birth, and which, until Hitler appeared, I regarded as the mortal foe of civilized freedom. What is it my duty to say to them now? I would not have come to Moscow unless you had felt sure that you would be able to discuss realities.
There are no people with weak nerves here, Prime Minister.
I suppose you want me to come to the question of the Second Front?
As you wish.
I wish to speak frankly, and to invite complete frankness from you in return. When Mr. Molotov came to London, I told him that we were trying to make plans for a diversion in France. I also made it clear that I could make no promises about 1942. Since then, an exhaustive examination of the problem has been carried out. The British and American governments do not feel themselves able to undertake a major operation in September, which is the latest month in which the weather is to be counted upon. But, as you know, we are preparing for a very great operation in 1943.
Is it impossible to attack any part of the French coast?
In 1942, yes.
There is not a single German division of any value in France.
There are, in France, 25 German divisions, 9 of which are of the first line.
And you are unwilling even to lend 6 divisions?
War is war, but not folly. And it would be folly to invite disaster. If by throwing in 150 to 200,000 men, we could render you aid by drawing away from the Russian front appreciable German forces, We would not shrink from this course on grounds of loss. But if it drew no men away and spoiled the prospects for 1943, it would be a great...
My view of war is different. A man who is not prepared to take a risk cannot win a war. Troops must be blooded in battle. If you do not blood your troops, you have no idea what their value is. Why are you so afraid of the Germans? I cannot understand.
Have you ever asked yourself why Hitler did not come to England in 1940 when he was at the height of his power and we had only 20,000 trained troops? He did not come. The fact is that Hitler was afraid of the operation. It is not so easy to cross the channel.
That is no analogy. The landing of Hitler would have been resisted by the people. A British landing in France and the people would be on the side of the British. It seems that you expect to pay your way by bombing Germany.
The present bombing of Germany's centres of industry is nothing to what will be done in 6 or even 3 months' time.
It is not only German industry that should be bombed, but the civilian population too.
We look upon the morale of German civilians as a military target. We sought no mercy and we shall show no mercy. If need be, we hope to shatter almost every dwelling in almost every city in Germany.
That would not be bad.
It'll be better still. We've now begun to use 4-ton bombs. Let's talk again about the second front, which is what I've come for. I do not think France is the only place for such an operation. We and the Americans have decided upon another plan, which I will now tell you about secretly.
You? I hope nothing about it will appear in your British press.
I wish I could control the British press as you control the Soviet press.
You have quite enough powers to exercise control whenever you wish to.
Oh. We want to take the strain off you. Our plan is called Operation Torch. If we can end this year in possession of North Africa, we can threaten the belly of Hitler's Europe. This is the crocodile. Our intention is to attack the soft underbelly of the crocodile and thus open another front, and all the time holding the enemy in France.
When will this be?
No later than October 30th, 1942.
First, this Operation Torch will hit Rommel in the back, yes? Mm-hmm. Second, it will overawe Spain, yes? Third, it will produce Germans fighting Frenchmen in France, yes? And fourth, it will expose Italy to the whole brunt of the war.
And fifth, it will shorten the sea route to the Mediterranean.
Stalin will make a big mistake if he treats us roughly after coming so far. Stalin is a very wise man. You may be sure that however he argues, he understands all.
No. Organization of the Second Front in Europe was decided during the visit of Molotov to London. You have not kept your promise.
I repudiate that statement. An aide memoir was given to Mr. Molotov, which distinctly says, provided that it proves sound and sensible.
Now we wonder whether we can in fact believe in the African campaign.
Which is only a political front, not military. Why are you so much afraid of Germans? Your convoys scatter. For the first time in history, the British Navy turns tail. Your British infantry should be like the Russians. They would find it not so bad. You have to fight one way or the other. You cannot win a war without fighting.
I pardon that remark. Only on account of the bravery of the Soviet troops.
Where is the guarantee that this solemn promise to invade Western Europe in 1943 will also not be broken?
The British Prime Minister will once again prove to us that his country is not in a position to sacrifice men.
While we're sacrificing 10,000 men a day.
There is no ring of comradeship in your attitude. I have traveled far to establish good working relations. We have done our utmost to help Russia, and will continue to do so. Remember, we were left entirely alone for a year against Germany and Italy. Alone! Now I find that you do not believe the sincerity of my statements. Now I hear you distrust my motives. Now I tell you this. Now that the three great nations are allied, victory is certain provided we do not fall apart.
By God, I like your spirit. Why should we not have some drinks?
I'm always in favor of such a policy, in principle.
What do you think? Should we let Molotov have one with us?
Is the Marshal aware that on Molotov's recent visit to Washington, he said he was going to pay a visit to New York entirely by himself, and the delay in his return was not due to any defect in the airplane, but because he was off on his own?
He wasn't in New York. He was in Chicago with all the other gangsters. The one thing about the Molotov is he can't drink. Any differences that exist between us in this war are only ones of method.
We will try to remove even those differences by deeds.
Cheers.
Cheers. Excellent. I'm sure it was better to have it out this way than any other. He knows the worst, and we parted in an atmosphere of goodwill.
All is clear. A campaign in Africa and Italy. They simply want to be the first in reaching the Balkans. They want us to bleed white in order to dictate their terms to us later on. I demand every measure to defend Stalingrad. That part that's been captured must be liberated.
Winston, torch. The North African attack should be launched at the earliest possible date.
Full blast!
I feel very strongly that the initial attacks must be made by an exclusively American ground force, supported by your naval and transport and air units.
The British will come in, only as and when you judge expedient. All our hopes now are centered on the battle. Alexander and Montgomery are going to fight against Rommel. It may well be the key to the future. Tell Alexander, let me have the word zip when you start.
Mr. President, Prime Minister, our position in the Stalingrad area has deteriorated due to the shortage of fighters, which makes it impossible for us to defend our troops. If together you could supply us with 800 fighters a month, Britain giving roughly 300, the USA 500.
We will ship you 276 combat planes this month.
We will give you 150.
Tens and hundreds of thousands of Soviet men, women, and children are dying, and Churchill wants to barter for a couple of dozen hurricanes. Rely only on ourselves. Don't count on getting any aid from our allies.
Zip! The great battle in Egypt has opened well. Mr. President, the whole force of the British Army will be engaged. All the Shermans and self-propelled guns which you gave me on that dark Tobruk morning, they will play their part. Mr. Fraser, you will have seen with pride all that your valiant New Zealanders are doing. Mr. Curtin, you will have observed with pleasure the distinguished part which the 9th Australian Division are playing. They are cutting into the enemy in the air, on the ground, on the sea. General Alexander, if your hopes at C.I.N.E.M.A are maintained, I propose to ring the bells all over Britain for the first time this war.
Yes? Thank God. Thank God. That sounds grand. Congratulations. Casualties are comparatively light. Much below predictions. Thank God. We've landed in North Africa. We're striking back.
We have begun offensive operations in the Stalingrad area.
Romel's army has been defeated. It has been routed. It has been very largely destroyed. It's a fighting force.
The operation is proceeding satisfactorily.
Now, this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is, perhaps, the end of the beginning.
Radio Moscow said today that the final numbers are in from Stalingrad and that they are staggering. Since February the 1st, 1943, the Soviet authorities report they have removed 147,000 German corpses and 47,000 Soviet corpses.
Yeah, they're searching for us. They're firing in us now.
In the
Solomon Islands, U.S. Navy planes have reportedly launched round-the-clock attacks against Japanese positions on Bougainville. Headquarters
The
is
first Allied foothold in Europe comes in Sicily, off the Toll de Buda, Italy, where British and American troops under General Alexander stormed Fortress Europe for the first time.
I could have never seen anything like this before. Neither have I. 4,000 pounds have just gone up to the side. Good job.
Reports are coming in of the greatest land battle ever fought. 2 million men, 6,000
Marshal Stalin,
5,000...
the weather being unsuitable over Berlin, we cast about 800 tons last night on Hamburg. I expect the Nazi experience will make them less keen about war than they used to be.
The big question is, can we work with Russia now and after the war?
I must admit, my thoughts rest primarily in Europe, the parent continent of the modern nations and civilizations. It would be a measureless disaster if Russian barbarism overlaid the culture and independence of the ancient states of Europe.
They will never accept the idea that so great a space should be red. Never. Never.
Easy. Mr. President? Mr. President.
No, sit down. Sit down, everybody. I see you have been doing your homework. Let's talk it through, shall we? According to this, the decisive effort of the war must be made against the continent of Europe from England, sooner or later. Although the British have rendered lip service to crossing the Channel, their hearts aren't in it. Their theory is that Germany can be defeated by a series of attritions in Italy, in the Mediterranean, the Balkans, and other satellite countries, and the only fighting that needs to be done will be done by Russia. In light of the post-war problems we face, that attitude towards Russia seems terribly dangerous. We are pledged, quite as clearly as Great Britain, to the opening of a real second front, but none of these methods of pinprick warfare can be counted on to fool Stalin into the belief that we are keeping that pledge. So, put briefly, what you all feel is that the time has come for us to decide that we must assume the responsibility of leadership in this great final movement of the war, the cross-channel invasion. Yes?
Yes, correct, sir.
Winston has got to be told. The best way of forcing Germany to fight is an invasion across the Channel.
We must come in, sir. I'll be back in an hour, Mr. Stop. Get me, Bomber Command, would you?
Have you noticed? The President is a very tired man. His mind seems closed. He's lost his wonderful elasticity.
We can, if we have to, carry out the cross-channel invasion ourselves. I'm sure the British would be glad to make the necessary bases in England available to us.
300,000 dead British soldiers floating in the Channel. I wake up at night and see the Channel floating with the bodies of the cream of our youth. Keep the undergrounds open at all times. I want to send Uncle Joe a telegram of congratulations on the capture of Orel. But since I have heard nothing from him about our progress in Sicily, I have decided to say nothing.
I have just come back from the front, and I take this opportunity to congratulate the British government and the Anglo-American troops on their highly successful operations in Sicily, which have already led to the fall of Mussolini and the collapse of his gang.
I have heard from the Great Bear, and we are on speaking, or at least growling terms again.
My dear Marshal Stalin, may I congratulate you on the tenacity and drive of your armies. It is magnificent. We are now at a crucial time in the war, a time presenting a unique chance for a rendezvous. I have the hope that you and Mr. Churchill and myself can meet as soon as possible. I personally can come as far as North Africa.
I too desire this as soon as possible. It would be advisable to select a country where all three nations are represented, such as Iran.
I am delighted with your willingness to meet. Personally, my only hesitation is the place. Under our Constitution, I must receive and return documents to Congress within 10 days, and Tehran makes this rather a grave risk if flying weather is bad. I hope you will consider Egypt, which is also a neutral state.
I have no objection to Tehran, which I think is a more suitable place than Egypt, where the Soviet Union is not yet represented.
The problem of my going to Tehran is that for constitutional reasons, I cannot take the risk. There is the possibility of meeting at some port in the eastern Mediterranean or Baghdad, where we could have 3 comfortable camps. Seems worth considering.
My colleagues hold that front operations necessitate day-to-day guidance by the Supreme Command. In Tehran, unlike the other places, these requirements can be met by communicating directly with Moscow by telegraph or telephone. For this reason, my colleagues insist on Tehran.
I am deeply disappointed. I must tell you that I cannot go to Tehran. I must carry on a constitutional government more than 150 years old. If it were not for this fact, I would gladly go 10 times the distance to meet you. Please do not fail me in this crisis.
The idea has occurred to me that I could be replaced at the meeting by Molotov. In that case, the difficulties of choosing a place would disappear.
You will be glad to know that I have worked out a method whereby, if there is a bill requiring my veto, I will fly to Tunis to meet it and then return to the conference. I have therefore decided to go to Tehran, and this makes me especially happy.
I'm very glad that the President is willing to fly to Tehran. I myself have for months past declared my willingness to go anywhere at any time when the 3 of us can meet together.
Well, we're preparing for a battle here at Tehran, but you'll find us lining up with the Russians.
The difficulty is not in winning a war. It is in persuading people to let you win the war. Persuading fools. I feel inclined to say to the Americans, all right, if you won't play with us in the Mediterranean, we won't play with you in the English Channel. And they will reply, all right, then we will concentrate all our effort in the Pacific. And I will reply, you are welcome to do so, if you wish.
Ah, Harry. Spot off. I was telling the President Soviet secret intelligence has uncovered a plot to kill 1 or more of the big 3 in Tehran. If anything like that were to happen, it could produce a most unfortunate impression.
This cannot be denied.
Marshal Stalin therefore urges you to move to the Soviet embassy.
Please thank the Marshal for his concern and tell him that I accept. I will be over this afternoon, when I at last shall have the pleasure of meeting him face to face. I don't believe there's any plot, but Stalin wants us over at the Russian embassy. I don't know a good Russian from a bad Russian. I can tell a good Frenchman from a bad Frenchman. I can tell a good Italian from a bad Italian. I know a good Greek when I see one, but I don't understand the Russians.
Mr. President.
Well, this is a very great occasion for me. I've been trying a long time to bring this about.
I am to blame. I have been very much occupied with military matters.
Well, I know. What is the situation on the Soviet battlefront?
On part of the front, not so good. We are about to lose Khorasan.
I wish it was within my power to bring about the removal of 30 or 40 German divisions from the Eastern Front. And this is one of the things I wish to discuss here in Tehran.
It would be of great value to us if it could happen.
An additional reason why I'm glad to be in this house is it affords us the opportunity of meeting more frequently and with complete informality under different circumstances.
You have all the time you wish.
Is the Prime Minister here yet?
Yes, on the second floor. This will take us up.
Now, we are sitting around this table for the first time as a family, with the one object of winning the war. We hope to be very successful and achieve constructive accord in order that we may maintain close touch throughout the war and after the war. Perhaps the Prime Minister would like to say something.
This is the greatest concentration of power that the world has ever seen. In our hands is the possible certainty of shortening the war, but the absolute certainty that we hold the happy future of mankind. I pray that we may be worthy of this remarkable opportunity granted to us by God, the opportunity of serving mankind.
Well said. Perhaps our host would like to say a few words.
History has given us big forces and great opportunities. Now let us get down to business.
Let us begin with the Pacific, where America is bearing a major part of the war. We are sinking many Japanese ships, both naval and merchant, more than they could possibly replace. We've been moving toward Japan from the south and the east. It is necessary for us to keep China in the war, so we have arranged plans for operations through North Burma. And now this whole operation covers a huge territory, and large numbers of ships and men and planes are necessary to carry it out. Now, as to the operations which are of immediate concern to the USSR and Great Britain, not only do we want to get across, but we intend to proceed inland into Germany. Now, it would be impossible to launch such an operation before May 1st, 1944. The Channel is such a disagreeable body of water. Now, we cannot do everything we would like to do in the Mediterranean and out of the United Kingdom. We should like to have the advice of our Soviet friends as to how we could best ease their position.
There are no differences between Great Britain and the United States, except as regards ways and means.
The USSR believes that operations in Italy are of no great value. The most suitable sector for a blow at Germany is from northern France. But it must be expected that the Germans will fight like devils to prevent such an attack.
We have long agreed that an invasion of France across the Channel should be undertaken, and we are resolved to do so in 1944. However, it is asked now what can be done in the meantime that will be of more use and take more weight off Russia, possibly without delaying Overlord more than a month or two. If the Anglo-American troops take Rome, then they are left with two choices. One, keep proceeding to southern France. And two, to eastward across the Adriatic.
It is not worthwhile to scatter the British and American forces. Crossing the Channel, Overlord should be in 1944. Other operations should be considered as diversionary.
Well, this is of considerable interest to me.
Our experience has convinced us that a large offensive from one direction is unwise. We usually attack from two directions, forcing the enemy to move his reserves from one front to the other. As the two offensives converge, the power of the whole offensive increases.
I think it would be a good idea for the staff to immediately conduct a study of the operations against southern France. Should we break for a few minutes, give them a chance to get started on organizing that now?
Has anything gone wrong? A bloody lot has gone wrong. I will not allow the great campaign in Italy to be cast aside and end in frightful disaster. Stalin ought to be told bluntly, the Overlord might have to be postponed.
Churchill likes to take the easy road and leave the difficult job to the Russians.
Stalin seems obsessed with the second front. I can be obstinate too. Damn fellow. Franklin, might you and I have lunch alone before our next meeting with Uncle Joe?
I don't think so, Winston.
Not like him, Harry.
The president doesn't want Stalin to get the impression that you two are putting your heads together, hatching your own schemes.
I can accept rebuffs as well as the next man. But Harry.
Sir?
One thing I will insist on. That I am host for dinner tomorrow evening. To begin with, I come first in seniority and alphabetically. In the second place, I represent the longest established of the three governments. And in the third place, tomorrow happens to be my birthday. There might be a more bloody war. I shall not be there. I shall be asleep. I want to sleep for billions of years. When I consider the vast issues, I realize just how inadequate we are. I believe man might destroy man and wipe out civilization. Europe would be desolate. And I may be held responsible. Stupendous issues are unfolding before our eyes, and we're only specks of dust that have settled on the night, on the map of the world. Why do I plague my mind with such things? I never used to worry about anything.
I'm sure we'll hit it off, Stalin and I. As for Uncle Joe and Winston, I'll have my work cut out for me between those two.
Who will command Operation Overlord?
It's not yet been decided.
In that case, nothing will come of Overlord.
I would like to say I am a little concerned at the number and complexity of the problems before this conference. The British staff and I have given prolonged thought to the Mediterranean theatre. We are most anxious to have the armies there fight. All I want is landing craft for 2 divisions. This cannot be supplied without delaying Overlord 6 to 8 weeks.
Overlord is the most important operation. Nothing should be done to distract attention from that. I want to see Overlord undertaken in May 1944. I insist on knowing the date for Overlord.
There is no decisive difference in principle. The only problem...
I want to ask Mr. Churchill,
an indiscreet question. Do the British really believe in Overlord, or are they only saying so to reassure the Russians?
Provided the conditions previously stated for Overlord are established when the time comes, it will be our stern duty to hurl across the Channel against the Germans every sinew of our strength. Nothing more can be done here.
Look at the figures.
Would it be possible for us to discuss the question of Poland?
Nothing you have said so far makes me want to discuss the question.
I have no power from Parliament, nor I believe does the President to define any frontiers. But we might, now, here, see if the three of us can form some sort of policy we can recommend to the Poles and advise them to accept.
Do you think we want to swallow Poland up?
We don't know how much we're going to eat. We believe that God is on our side. At least, I have done my best to make him a faithful ally.
And the devil is on my side? Because everybody knows the devil is a communist. And God, of course, is a good conservative.
The way to kill the most Germans with the least loss of American soldiers is to mount one great big invasion and slam them with everything we've got. Makes sense to me, makes sense to Uncle Joe. It's the quickest way to win the war, that's all. Trouble is, the Prime Minister is thinking too much about the post-war and where England will be. He's scared of letting the Russians get too strong. Well, maybe the Russians will be strong in Europe. Whether that's a bad thing depends on a whole lot of factors. I've got to do something to establish better relations with Stalin. Winston, I hope you won't be sore at me for what I'm going to do. Look at old John Bull over there. You know, if he were in a blanket blowing those smoke signals, we'd call him an Indian. Not John Bull, but Chief Sitting Bull. Of course, Marshal Stalin, you well understand that any time you mention the word Indian to an Englishman, all he wants is to expand the beloved empire. Now, we can't have that, can we?
I propose a toast to Mr. Winston Churchill, who nurses a secret affection for Germany. To Churchill, who wishes to see a soft peace for the Germans. Just because the Russians are a simple people, it is a mistake to believe they are blind and cannot see what is before them. You are pro-German. To make sure that Germany will not rise again in 15 or 20 years to plunge the world into another war, 50,000 of their officers must be rounded up and shot.
The British Parliament and public would never tolerate mass executions.
50,000 must be shot.
I would rather be taken out into the garden here and now and be shot myself than sully my own and my country's honor by such infamy.
I have a compromise to propose. Not 50,000 should be shot,
but only 49,000.
We were playing with you.
Where's your sense of humor?
Someday, I would like to visit your front. I'm in my 70th year.
Don't boast. I am only 4 years younger than you.
Winston, you're fighting a losing battle and trying to delay the invasion of France. There's really nothing you can do but yield with grace.
Operation Overlord will be started in May 1944. It will be supported by an operation against southern France.
Here, here.
I want to call Mr. Churchill my friend.
Call me Winston. I call you Joe behind your back.
I want to call you my friend. I want to be allowed to call you my good friend.
I lift my glass to Winston Churchill, for whom I have long had the greatest admiration.
To my fighting friend, Churchill.
I wish to propose a toast to Marshal Stalin, who is worthy to stand with the great figures of Russian history and merits the title, Stalin the Great.
Hear, hear.
It is easy to be a great leader if one has to deal with people such as the Russians. The Russian people tolerate no less from their army. Even people of medium courage, even cowards, become heroes in the Soviet Union. In Russia, it is dangerous to be a coward.
I drink to the proletarian masses.
I drink to the Conservative Party.
To our unity, war and peace.
War and peace. War and peace.
I would like the privilege of adding a last word. These meetings at Tehran have raised all our hopes that the future will find a better world. In our country, the rainbow is the symbol of good fortune and hope. As we prepare to leave this historic gathering, we remember we saw today in the sky for the first time that traditional symbol of hope, the rainbow.
When this war is over, as a reward, His Majesty's government would like to bestow on you a noble title.
Membership in the House of Lords is one reward I do not covet.
The title is already selected. You will be named Lord Root of the Matter.
Thank you.
We've got our differences, but no one could have a better or sturdier ally than that old Tory. Stalin is get at him.
Roosevelt has given his word that large-scale action will be mounted in France in 1944. I believe that he will keep his word. But even if he doesn't, we have enough forces of our own to destroy Nazi Germany.
In England, the long and eagerly awaited invasion of the continent of Europe continues to take shape as hundreds of thousands of men make final preparations under the watchful eye of General Eisenhower. The $64 questions the whole world is asking, and Herr Hitler in particular is dying to know the answers to: where and when?
Marshal Stalin. The general crossing of the Channel will take place on May 31st. The date might be shifted 2 or 3 days, one way or the other, depending on weather and tide.
I am confident that Overlord will be a success. As agreed in Tehran, the Red Army will launch a new offensive at the same time, so as to give maximum support to the Anglo-American operations.
If Overlord fails, the United States will have lost a battle. But for us, it will mean the end of our military capability.
Some people think that because we are the allies of the English, we have forgotten who they are and who Churchill is. The English find nothing sweeter than to trick their allies. And Churchill is the kind of man, if you don't watch him, he'll slip a kopeck out of your pocket. Yes, by God, a kopeck. And Roosevelt, he's not like that. He'll only dip his hands in for bigger coins. But Churchill, even for a kopeck.
Get me Mrs. Roosevelt, please.
I have hardened very much upon this Operation Overlord, and I am in this thing with you to the end. But if it fails, we shall go down together.
Babs, now I can tell you. Tomorrow is D-Day. No, I won't be able to sleep either.
Do you realize that by the time you wake up in the morning, 20,000 men may have been killed?
Yes, there'll be a landing, if there is no fog. Up until now, there was always something that interfered. Tomorrow, there'll be something else. Maybe they'll meet some Germans. What if they meet up with some Germans? Maybe there'll be no landing then. Just promises as usual.
No. This time it will really be so.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen,
of the Allied Expeditionary Force. You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
Almighty God, our sons, pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, and our civilization, and to set free the suffering humanity.
This is the day and this is the hour. The sky is lightening over the coast of Europe as we go in. The sun is blazing down brightly now. It's almost like an omen, the way it suddenly came out just as we were going in. The whole sky is bright, the sea is a glittering mass of silver.
Where I am standing between the two pilots of this glider, I can see the navigation lights of the tug in front of us, and off to the left and right.
The parachutes are landing. They're landing all around me as I speak. And they're fluttering down, red, white and blue parachutes fluttering down.
They received a particularly severe welcome from the German air-act defenses, and the flak has been going up from all around. I can see about 4 or 5 coming in through the trees, all laden up with equipment so heavily that they can barely walk. But they've got to carry with them the means by which they can fight the moment they land.
It appears that the landing planned on a tremendous scale has been crowned with success. I and my colleagues cannot but recognize that this is an enterprise unprecedented in military history. Hitler, the hysteric who for 2 years boasted that he would cross the Channel, did not venture even to make an attempt. None but our allies has been able to fulfill with flying colors the grand plan for crossing the Channel. History will record this as a feat of the highest order.
Paper should be draft, setting forth the boot issues between us and the Soviet government, which are developing in Italy, in Romania, in Bulgaria, in Yugoslavia, and above all, in Greece. The issue is, are we going to acquiesce in the communization of the Balkans, and perhaps of Italy? If the conclusion is that we resist the communist infusion and invasion, we should put it to them plainly. Do you think, Marshal Stalin, the Soviet government might leave Britain to manage the situation in Greece while fighting is still going on there? And that Great Britain might leave the situation in Romania to the Soviet government during the fighting there?
My government agrees with this suggestion. But before giving any final assurance, we would like to know whether you have consulted the United States.
In our opinion, this arrangement would certainly result in the persistence of differences between you and the Soviets, and the division of the Balkan area into spheres of influence. I think I should tell you frankly, Winston, that we were disturbed that your people took this up with us only after it was put up to the Russians, and they inquired whether we were agreeable.
I proposed to the Russians a temporary working arrangement for the better conduct of the war. I cannot admit that I have done anything wrong in this matter. The question remains, What should our forces in the Mediterranean do? General Eisenhower naturally wants to strengthen his attack in northwest Europe by all available means. Northern Italy does not attract him. Southern France does. Our first wish is to help Eisenhower, but we do not think this necessarily involves the complete ruin of all our great affairs in the Mediterranean. And we take it hard that this should be demanded of us.
Use of the Mediterranean resources to advance on northern Italy is not acceptable to me.
Let us resolve not to wreck one great campaign in Italy for the sake of another in France. Both can be won.
Perhaps so, but I'm mindful of our agreement with Stalin and his view classifying operations in the Mediterranean as of lesser importance.
I don't know what Stalin would say if the issue was put to him to decide. It is better to settle the matter for ourselves. Political considerations are an important factor.
Important, but definitely secondary to the primary operations of striking at the heart of Germany.
What can I do, Mr. President, when your chiefs of staff insist on casting aside our Italian offensive campaign with all its dazzling possibilities?
At Tehran, we agreed upon a definite plan of attack. My dear friend, I beg you, let us go ahead with our plan. I honestly believe that God will be with us, as he was in Overlord and in Italy and in North Africa.
The Americans are bullying us. We have a big, strong, dominating partner. Not one who sees our point of view. Good God! Can't they see that the Russians are spreading across Europe like a tide? They have invaded Poland. There is nothing to prevent them from marching into Turkey and Greece.
Harry, I distinctly remember ordering you to take the day off.
This cable's coming in from Harriman in Moscow. I told them to bring the rest up as soon as they get it decoded. Now that the end of the war is in sight, our relations with the Soviets have taken a startling turn. They've held up our request with complete indifference and have shown unwillingness even to discuss pressing problems. The Soviets' indifference to world opinion regarding their unbending policy toward Poland is best described by Molotov's statement that the Russians judge their friends by those that accept the Soviet position. The general attitude seems to be that it is our obligation to help Russia and accept her policies because she has won the war for us. They have misinterpreted our generous attitude towards them as a sign of weakness and acceptance of their policies.
The time has come when we must make clear what we expect from them as the price of our goodwill. Unless we take issue with the present policy, there's every indication that the Soviet Union will become a world bully whenever her interests are involved. There are two kinds of people. Those who believe that we must cooperate with the Russians and trust Russia for the peace of the world, and those who agree with Winston when he says, what are we going to have between the white snows of Russia and the white cliffs of Dover? I belong to the Cooperation and Trust School.
Red Army. Red Army. Once they get into our country, it's not going to be easy to get them out. Stalin will get what he wants. The Americans have seen to that. All might be well if I could only win Stalin's friendship. After all, it's stupid for the president to suppose he's the only person that can handle him. I talk to him quite easily, one human being to another. I'm sure Stalin would be sensible. I'm going to Moscow.
Winston, it had been my hope that no meeting would be held until we could all get together. But I'll consider your talks as merely a preliminary to a conference of all three of us.
Of course. I want to tell you why I've come to Moscow. The President and I have been like brothers in this war. But I don't want the Russians to feel that this is just an Anglo-Saxon affair. I want you to know it is the three of us. We can settle everything, we three, if we come together. If we do not, it'll mean years of diplomatic wrangling and suspicion. I would like to begin with the most tiresome question, Poland. You recognize those who call the Warsaw Poles as having a legitimate claim to be the government of a restored Poland. We and the Americans believe those we call the London Poles should be the government, as we feel they more represent the wishes of the Polish people. We should have a common policy. At present, each of us has a gamecock in his hand.
It would be difficult without a gamecock. They are the morning signal.
The difficulty about the Poles is they have unwise political leaders. Where there are two poles, there is one quarrel.
Where there is one Pole, he begins to quarrel with himself through sheer boredom.
The leader of the London Poles is a peasant and very obstinate.
I am a peasant too.
You can be as obstinate as any of them. We'll bring pressure on the Polish government in exile in London. The Poles here, the Warsaw Poles, are of course already in agreement with you. Now, let us settle about our affairs in the Balkans. Don't let us get at cross purposes in small ways. So far as Britain and Russia are concerned, how would it do for you to have 90% dominance in Romania? We to have 90% in Greece, in accord with the Americans. 50, Yugoslavia and Hungary. In Bulgaria, you would have 75%. We would have 25%. We have a particular interest in Greece, just as you do in Romania. We must be the leading Mediterranean power. It's a serious matter for Britain when the Mediterranean route is not in her hands.
Britain should have the first say in Greece.
It is better to express these things in diplomatic terms and not use the phrase dividing into spheres, because the Americans might be shocked. But as long as you and I understand each other, I can explain matters to the President. Might it not be thought rather cynical if it seemed we had disposed of these issues, so fateful to millions of people, in such an offhand manner? Let us just burn the paper.
No. You keep it.
I feel very deeply the responsibility which lays on me trying to frame proposals for Russo-Polish settlement.
Poland is fortunate that I have not asked for more. You know, we don't intend to make the Poles a communist state after the war. Communism does not fit the Poles. They are too nationalistic, too individualistic. Poland's future should be based on private enterprise. Poland will be a capitalist state. Russia really has no wish to convert the world to communism, as many people fear. We Russians are not as clever as you think. We're simple, rather stupid. No one in Europe could be persuaded that England is either simple or stupid. I do not speak much, but drinking eases the tongue. I am a rough man, and not much good at compliments.
But after all, As I always tell the House of Commons, it's you Russians who have torn the guts out of the foul Hun.
Guts is the word.
I'm glad now that I did not kill you back in 1919 when I opposed the Russian Revolution. I hope you are glad you did not kill me.
There is a Russian proverb. A man's eyes should be torn out if he can only see the past.
I must say, I greatly covet that man's goodwill. Stalin looks much older than Tehran. He's not a good color. Ashen. Yes, that's it. If anything should happen to him, it would be a catastrophe. When this fellow goes, you don't know what will happen in Europe. There may be a lot of trouble.
I am sure that the progress made in Moscow will facilitate the work of our next meeting, when all three of us should reach full agreement. I've been thinking of the practicality of Cyprus, Athens, or Malta.
If the idea of our meeting on the Soviet Black Sea appears acceptable to you, I would consider it very desirable.
The Black Sea. Dr. McIntyre says that all sorts of diseases are rampant there, from dysentery to the bubonic plague.
Since my doctors do not recommend that I take any big trips at the present time, I have to give consideration to that.
His doctors don't want him to make any big trips.
Herman told Stalin he hoped either the doctors would change their minds or Stalin would change doctors.
I consider the Black Sea out of the question. I am somewhat attracted to the suggestion of Jerusalem.
I don't think there's any chance that he will agree to Jerusalem.
I think we ought to put the proposition to Uncle Joe, so on him the onus of refusing. After all, we are respectable people too.
Marshal Stalin. My Navy people recommend strongly against the Black Sea.
I greatly regret that.
Mr. President, there's not a chance of getting Stalin out of Russia at this time. We might as well make up our minds to go to Russia.
I suggest Yalta on the Black Sea and the Crimea.
I am prepared to go to Yalta. We will arrive by plane from some Mediterranean port.
Malta. Malta, Yalta. No more let us falter. From Malta to Yalta. Let nobody alter. If we had spent 10 years on research, we could not have found a worse place than Yalta. But I feel I can survive it by bringing an adequate supply of whiskey. It's good for typhus and deadly on lice, which thrive in those parts. Franklin, would it be possible for you to spend 2 or 3 nights at Malta and let the staffs have a talk together unostentatiously?
The Russians are inordinately suspicious of any meetings between Churchill and me, and that includes secret meetings of the staff. With favorable weather conditions, we could be in Malta on February 2nd, but it will be necessary to proceed to Yalta by air the same day in order to meet our date with Uncle Joe.
What are your ideas of the length of our stay at Yalta? This may well be a fateful conference, coming at a moment when the great allies are so divided.
No more than 5, 6 days.
I do not see any way of realizing our hopes about world organization in 5 or 6 days. Even the Almighty took 7.
I am personally fond of Winston.
As we are unable to meet before Yalta, I feel that the time has come for me to place before you the serious and disappointing war situation which faces us at the close of 1944. We have not yet reached the Rhine, and we shall have to continue the great battle many weeks before we can establish our bridgeheads. After that, we have to advance through to Germany. But
I have always felt that the occupation of Germany would be a very stiff job. Because in the old days I bicycled over most of the Rhine terrain, I've never been as optimistic as to the ease of getting across the Rhine
it's
as
also
many
clear
of our people.
We have to face a marked degree of frustration in Italy. The escape home of a large part of the German forces from the Balkans. Frustration in Burma. Elimination of China as a combatant. The question very definitely arises. What are we going to do about it?
Perhaps I'm not close enough to the picture to feel as disappointed with the war situation as you are. You and I are now in the position of commanders-in-chief, who have prepared their plans, issued their orders, and committed their resources to battle. I still can't see clearly just when, but soon. A decisive break in our favor is about to come. I am personally fond of Winston, but I am finding him to be dangerous and excitable. Marshal Stalin, the military situation in Belgium is not bad, but...
Quiet!
Marshal Stalin.
Wait.
The Battle of the Bulge is very heavy. And I shall be grateful if you can tell me whether we can count on a major Russian offensive. I regard the matter as urgent.
The weather is at present unfavorable. Nevertheless, taking into account the position of our allies, we will commence large-scale operations against the Germans along the whole central front.
I am most grateful to you.
It would be foolish of me to stand aside and let the Germans annihilate you. They would only turn back on me when you were disposed of. Continue.
Make no mistake. All the Balkans except Greece are going to be Bolshevized. And there is nothing I can do to prevent it. There's nothing I can do for poor Poland either. Best wishes for this new, disgusting year. There is probably more suffering among humanity as of this hour than ever before in history. As I look out on the world, it is one of sorrow and bloodshed. The only hope for the world is the agreement of the great powers. As they quarrel, our children are undone.
I have high hopes for the meetings here at Yalta. We make real progress in strengthening the personal relationship between myself and Stalin. Winston!
My dear friend. Harry?
Sir.
How was your journey?
I slept 10 hours a night on the sea voyage to Malta, but I still don't feel slept out.
Come on. Marshal Stalin.
Yes, I'm tired. So would you be if you'd spent the last 5 years pushing Winston uphill in a wheelbarrow. Marshal Stalin.
I hope everything has been done to make you comfortable.
Absolutely. I'm just delighted to see you. Okay.
Mr. Hopkins, please.
I must say the military situation has improved considerably since we last met.
The president looks frail and ill. Transparent, almost. He's very friendly. Stalin must realize that people in England who are keenest on relations with Russia are most worried over Poland. We can't agree that Poland should be a mere puppet state of Russia, where the people who don't agree with Stalin are bumped off. The Americans are profoundly ignorant of the Polish problem.
I welcome Russia's friends to the Crimea. As host, I have the right to name the presiding officer, and that will be Franklin D. Roosevelt.
I am honored
to begin this great conference. I know that while we are here at Yalta, we will cover the map of the world. But today, I think that military questions, particularly those on the most important front of all, the Eastern Front, should be the subject of discussions. I want to say, first of all, Marshal Stalin, I doubt whether the Soviet people were any more thrilled than the Americans and the British when your armies crossed over into Germany.
We are advancing on a 700-kilometer front. 45 German divisions have been routed, 100,000 prisoners, 300,000 killed, total 400,000. The Germans have already moved to the Eastern Front 16 divisions. We therefore wish you to start an offensive for which the situation is now very favorable. Are there any questions?
I have several. Whether we could be of more help to you reinforcing the Western Front or by moving through the Balkans to join up with you. But the staffs can deal with the military questions while we deal with the political ones. The whole world will have its eyes on this conference. If it is successful, we will have peace for 100 years. Only the great powers who have fought the war and shed the blood can make the peace.
The three great powers which have borne the brunt of the war have liberated the small countries should have the unanimous right to preserve the peace of the world. It is ridiculous to believe that a small country, Albania, for example, should have an equal voice with us.
I agree that we necessarily bear the major responsibility for the peace, but I also think that it is essential to exercise this power with respect for the rights of the smaller nations.
Yugoslavia, Albania, and such small countries do not deserve to be at this table. Do you want Albania to have the same rights as the United States?
There is no question of the small powers dictating to the big powers, but great nations should discharge their moral responsibility with great respect for the rights of smaller nations. The eagle should permit the small bird to sing, and care not wherefore they sang.
And the whole problem of dealing with the smaller powers is not so simple. We have, for instance, lots of Poles in America who are vitally interested in the future of Poland.
But of your 7 million Poles in America, only 7,000 vote. I know I'm right. I looked it up.
I feel the conference should proceed to the consideration of the United States proposal in regard to the new world organization to be called the United Nations. On December 5th, I sent you both a proposal calling for the unanimity of the 4 permanent members of the Security Council in all decisions relating to a threat to the peace. We also feel that any member state should have the right to state its own case.
I find the proposals entirely satisfactory. The British government would consider that they were committing an injustice if reservation were not made in the United Nations Organization for free statement of small countries. The matter looks as though the 3 great powers were trying to rule the world, whereas our desires are to save it from a repetition of the horrors of this war.
I would like to ask Mr. Churchill for further clarification of what powers he has in mind when he speaks of a desire to rule the world. Who is contemplating such a domination? Is it...
May I answer?
In a minute. Is it the United States? No, it is not thinking of such domination. Is it Britain? No, once again, it is not Britain. Thus, 2 great powers are beyond suspicion. That leaves the third, the USSR. So it is the USSR that is striving for world domination? It is clear that talk of striving for world domination is pointless. My friend Churchill cannot name a single power that wants to dominate the world. I will study the proposals. We are interested in decisions, not discussions.
Stalin can't be much interested in a world peace organization like the United Nations if 2 months after you sent him the proposal, he hasn't even read it.
A good beginning. There's one thing I want to tell you. The Prime Minister and I have been cabling back and forth for years now, and we have a term by which we refer to you, and that's Uncle Joe.
What do you mean?
It's a term of endearment, as if you're a member of a family.
I think I will leave now.
He's just pulling your leg. We have known this for years. All of Russia knows you call him Uncle Joe.
The Prime Minister rises late in the morning, don't you, Winston?
Yeah.
And then works hard until mid-afternoon, sleeps before dinner, and then he's up half the night talking. What's your schedule?
I work until 5 in the morning. So do all my admirals and generals. I sleep until 10 in the morning. Not so easy in life. I do it 7 days a week. Small birds. Better be careful where they sing.
Franklin, before our next meeting, I hope you will side with us in demanding not less than an independent coalition government in Poland and free elections.
Something will have to be done. Good night, Winston. And there are times when a long-distance point of view is useful. My own view is that, in general, like Marshal Stalin, I favor the Curzon line. But the most important question is that of a permanent government for Poland. Now, opinion in the United States is against recognition of the Warsaw Poles that you support Marshal Stalin on the grounds that they represent a small portion of the Polish people. What the people want is a government of national unity that would represent all the major parties.
I want to see the Poles have a home where they can organize their lives as they wish. It must not be forgotten that Great Britain went to war to protect Poland against German aggression at a time when, because of our unpreparedness, that decision was most risky. It almost cost us our life as a nation. The question is one of honor. Because we drew the sword for Poland against Hitler's brutal attack, my government will therefore never be content with a solution which does not leave Poland a free and independent state.
Mr. Churchill has said that for Great Britain, the question of Poland is one of honor. I can understand that. For Russians, Poland is not only a question of honor, but of security. The point is, throughout history, Poland was a corridor for enemies to attack Russia. In the last 30 years, Germany has twice passed through this corridor easily. Why were they able to do this? Because Poland was so weak. Russia wants a strong, independent, and democratic Poland. Why? Because it is impossible for Russia's forces alone to close this corridor from the outside. It has to be done from the inside. by Poland's own forces. That is why we want a strong and independent Poland. Because Poland is a question of life and death for us. As to the question of the Polish government, it will be difficult to bring all the Poles together. The Poles we support, the Warsaw Poles, won't even talk about a fusion government to the London Poles. I am prepared to support any attempt that would offer some chance of success. What is to be done?
I wish to thank Marshal Stalin for his remarks. We have different sources of information. Perhaps I am mistaken, but I doubt that the Warsaw Poles represent even 1/3 of the Polish people. I do not believe they would be maintained in power if the people were free to express their opinion. I fear collisions. I fear bloodshed, arrests, deportation. I fear the effect on the whole Polish question.
The Polish question has been giving the world a headache for 5 centuries.
The long meetings are really Winston's fault because he makes so many speeches. They're good speeches, though. Winston doesn't make any other kind. Surely there is a way to reconcile our differences on Poland. You must believe me, Marshal Stalin, that our people at home say, if we cannot get a meeting of the minds now, when our armies are converging on the common enemy, how can we get an understanding on even more vital things in the future?
Mr. Molotov has worked out some proposals on the Polish question. But first, I suggest that we proceed to the question of voting in the United Nations. I will ask Mr. Molotov to state the views of the Soviet government.
We have heard explanations of the President's proposals for voting in the United Nations. The Soviet government feels these proposals fully guarantee the unity of the great powers in the preservation of the peace. Therefore, they are entirely acceptable and there is full agreement on this subject.
This is a great step forward, which will be welcomed by all the people of the world.
I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Marshal Stalin and Mr. Molotov for this enormous step.
We are now ready with the following proposals on the Polish question.
First, the Curzon line should be the eastern frontier of Poland. Second, add to the Warsaw Polish government some democratic leaders from the Polish circles abroad. Third, the enlarged Polish government should as soon as possible call the population to the polls for organization of a permanent government. I feel these proposals go far toward meeting the President's wishes.
I feel that progress has been made, but I should like the opportunity to study these proposals.
Yes, certainly.
I agree with the President that it would be well to think more on this problem. But I do feel some progress has been made.
Good. Tonight, you will all be my guests at the banquet.
The most important thing is to maintain the unity of the 3 great powers, to defeat Germany and Japan, and then to get around a table and organize the United Nations.
In an alliance, the allies should not deceive each other. Perhaps that is naive, but then I, as a naive man, think it is best not to deceive my ally. even if he is a fool. Perhaps our alliance is so firm just because we do not deceive each other. Or is it all because it is not so easy to deceive each other? I am talking as an old man. That is why I'm talking so much. But I want to drink to our alliance that it should not lose its character of intimacy. Peace.
This is the crucial point of the conference. We take different views about basic facts in Poland. According to British information, the provisional Warsaw government does not commend itself to the great majority of the Polish people. And we cannot feel that it would be accepted abroad as representing them.
Now we're going to hear from old Stoneass.
The Soviet delegation is extremely anxious to come to an agreement on Poland. We propose the following wording. The present provisional government in Warsaw should be reorganized on a wider democratic basis with the inclusion of democratic leaders living abroad.
I'm glad to see that an advance has been made. There is an atmosphere of agreement, but there is also a desire to put foot in the stirrup and be off. These might well be the most important days of our lives. I have to give the House of Commons real assurances that free elections will be held. I do not care much about polls myself.
There are good men among the Poles. In earlier times, many of them were scientists. They are brave fighters. The Polish have produced some outstanding artists.
And this reorganized government shall be pledged to holding free elections as soon as possible.
I want this election in Poland to be beyond question. It should be like Caesar's wife. I did not know her, but they said she was pure.
That's what they said. But she had her sins.
Can we add an exchange of ambassadors who would keep us informed about the situation in Poland?
Agreed.
I want a hot bath, a good soak.
If I had known how tired the president is, I would have agreed to meet along the Mediterranean.
All now depends upon the spirit in which these agreements are carried out.
Admiral Leahy says this is so elastic, the Russians can stretch it from Yalta to Washington without ever breaking it.
I know it. But it's the best I can do for Poland at this time.
We really believed in our hearts that this was the dawn of the new day we had all been praying for and talking about for so many years. We were absolutely certain we had won the first great victory of the peace. And by we, I mean the whole civilized human race. The Russians had proved they could be reasonable and far-seeing, and there was no doubt in the mind of the president or any of us that we could live with them peacefully for as far into the future as any of us could imagine.
You know, I was 28 years old when I entered political life. But even at that time, Winston had had long experience in the service of his country.
I face difficult elections in England in the near future.
Everybody knows they need a leader. What better leader than he who won the victory?
I shall have to speak very harshly about the communists.
The communists are good boys.
We are against them, and we shall have to make our case. You know, we have two parties in England, You've only one. You have a much easier job of it. You've only one party.
Experience has shown that one party is of great convenience to a leader of state. Mr. President, Prime Minister, thank you.
Where?
I understand Stalin, and he understands me.
Oh, Neville Chamberlain, believe you could trust Hitler. He was wrong. I don't think I'm wrong about Stalin. Franklin has such a slender contact on life. Peace with Germany and Japan on our terms will not bring much rest to you and me if I am still responsible. When the war of the giants is over, the war of the pygmies will begin. There will be a torn, ragged, and hungry world to help to its feet. And what will Uncle Joe or his successor say to the way we should both like to do it? Now that Harry is ill, my poor friend is very much alone. And according to all accounts I received, bereft of much of his vigor.
The work, my friends, is peace. More than the end of this war, the end of the beginning of all wars. Yes, the end forever of this impractical, unrealistic settlement of the differences between governments by the mass killing of peoples. And to you, and to all Americans who dedicate themselves with us to the making of an abiding peace, I say the only limit to our realization of tomorrow is our doubts of today. Let us move forward with strong and active faith.
I have a terrific headache. Franklin Roosevelt, there died the greatest American friend we have ever known, and the greatest champion of freedom who has ever brought help and comfort from the New World to the Old.
President Roosevelt has died, but his cause must live on.
I have lost a dear and cherished friendship which was forged in the fire of war. Oh, Harry, I understand how deep your feelings of grief must be.
Final assault on Berlin has begun.
2 million Soviet soldiers under Generals Konov and Zhukov, behind 6,000 tanks and 6...
Here is a bulletin. German sources inside the beleaguered city of Berlin report that Adolf Hitler has committed suicide in his bunker. Repeating, according to German sources, Adolf Hitler has committed suicide in his bunker.
Yesterday morning, at 2:41 a.m., at headquarters, General Jodl, the representative of the German High Command, and Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea, and air forces in Europe to the Allied expeditionary forces, and simultaneously to the Soviet High Command.
The day of the great victory has come. The great sacrifices that we have made in the name of freedom and the defense of our motherland, the incalculable sufferings and privations experienced by our people during the course of the war has been crowned by complete victory over the enemy.
God bless you all. This is your victory. This is the victory to the cause of freedom in every land. In our long history, we have never had as great a day as this. I send you heartfelt greetings, Master Stalin, on the splendid victory you have won in driving the invader from your soil and laying the Nazi tyrant low.
I salute you, Prime Minister, and congratulate you cordially on this great victory over our common enemy.
To happen about Russia. I have always worked for friendship with Russia, but I feel deep anxiety because of their misinterpretations of the Yalta decisions, their attitude towards Poland, their overwhelming influence in the Balkans, the combination of Russian power and the territories under their control, and above all, their power to maintain very large armies in the field for a long time. What will be the position in a year or two when the British and American armies have melted? When Russia may choose to keep 200 divisions on active service. An Iron Curtain is being drawn down, and we don't know what is going on behind.
Surely, if the soldiers of the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union can fight together and win a glorious military victory, then indeed, in spite of every difficulty, the Allied statesmen will create the basis for a just and lasting peace.